Hello and welcome to World Panorama, your favorite weekly show for all the updates and analysis of all the biggest international news stories. I'm Aishwarya Kapoor with you. Let us start the program with this week's top stories. Mahinda Rajapaksa stages a dramatic political comeback in Sri Lanka, sworn in as the new Prime Minister after President Maithripala Sirisena sacks Premier Ranil Wickremesinghe. US urges political parties in the island nation to abide by constitution. China and Japan signed more than 10 agreements on politics, innovation, finance and other areas during Shinzo Abe's groundbreaking visit to Beijing. Asia's two biggest economies look to build relations and trust against a backdrop of trade friction with the United States. Cash-strapped Pakistan secures loans from Saudi Arabia to the tune of $6 billion. Decision after Imran Khan holds talks with Saudi leadership on the sidelines of an investment conference in Riyadh. IMF team to visit Pakistan to kickstart bailout negotiations on 7th of November. President Donald Trump reveals US intention to withdraw from 31-year-old nuclear weapons INF agreement with Russia. John Bolton confirms withdrawal after meeting Vladimir Putin in Russia, says Russia violating the treaty for years. Arms control regime helped preserve peace since the Cold War. And Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, first reaction on journalist Jamal Khashoggi since his disappearance, vows to punish all the culprits responsible for the murder. Kingdom now admits that Khashoggi murder was premeditated. The biggest developing story is Sri Lanka's President Maithripala Sirisena has named his predecessor Mahinda Rajapaksa as the country's new Prime Minister after the collapse of the governing coalition. Sirisena sacked Premier Ranil Wickremesinghe after the President United People's Freedom Alliance Party quit the government. Now, television pictures showed Rajapaksa, who last month led the opposition protests against the government, being sworn in before Sirisena, surrounded by a number of opposition legislators. Opponents say that the move is unconstitutional. President Sirisena had been an ally of and minister under Rajapaksa before turning against him. Wickremesinghe helped the president triumph in the 2015 poll, but the pair reportedly clashed in cabinet over several issues. The United States has urged political parties in Sri Lanka to abide by the constitution and refrain from violence. And on to the other big story that unfolded this week in Asia. It took nearly 7 years, but a Japanese leader this week made an official visit to China for bilateral talks for the first time since 2011. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe arrived in Beijing on Thursday on a 3-day visit as both the countries try to repair ties that have been riven by disputes over territory, military expansion in the Pacific and World War II history. However, the visit is expected to carve out a new scope for cooperation between Asia's two biggest economies, and it comes amid Beijing's worsening trade war with the United States.
Chinese Premier Li Keqiang calling on China and Japan to work together to build more mature, steady and progressive bilateral ties. Li was delivering a speech at a reception marking the 40th anniversary of the signing of the China-Japan Treaty of Peace and Friendship. The event was organized during Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's 3-day official visit to China. It is the first official visit by a Japanese Prime Minister in 7 years. The two leaders held a bilateral meeting. Abe also met President Xi Jinping.
Now both countries are on a journey to expand cooperation. With this visit, everyone is working together to move our boat of friendship between Japan and China forward step by step.
Abe's visit to China comes at a time when both the nations have mutual concerns about the US. particularly with US President Trump's protectionist trade policies. Battered by plummeting relations with Washington and particularly by President Trump's trade war, Xi is looking to a friendlier Japan as a hedge.
China's opening and reform is the great course of developmental progress that China has made with the world. In the midst of that progress, there are the contributions made by Japan. China and Japan have both provided important opportunities for each other's development as they support and boost each other's own development.
However, neither side is expecting miracles. Ties between China and Japan have long been plagued by wartime grievances and competing sovereignty claims over the East China Sea. The relations further nosedived in 2012 when Japan nationalized part of the Senkaku Islands, a chain of islets claimed by both countries. The countries are also strategic rivals, each trying to promote itself as a partner of choice for less powerful Asian nations. As China rapidly modernizes its military, Japan remains wary of its strategic intent. With such concerns in mind, Japan is enthusiastically participating in an informal, implicitly anti-China alliance with the United States, India and Australia, which has become known as the Quad. However, both China and Japan want the trade relations, which took a deep dive from 2012 to 2014 after the rupture over the disputed islands, to keep growing. Chinese Premier Li Keqiang also invited Japan to work with China through such projects as Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative to create a huge economic zone.
It has been a process of intense collisions, which is a right choice in terms of China's diplomacy and national strategy. It is our unremitting efforts, firm principled stand, diplomatic efforts to improve bilateral ties that have brought a change in the relations between the two countries.
No one is expecting the two Asian powers to become instant partners or even to manage a major reconciliation. But in the age of Trump, both are looking for a little more normality.
And to get a perspective on the story, we have with us Mr. Shrikant Kondapalli, Professor in Chinese Studies, Center for East Asian Studies in GNU. Thank you so much, Professor, for joining us here on Rajya Sabha Television. Sir, speaking about Shinzo Abe's visit to China, of course, a tough line really on China helped Shinzo Abe regain power in 2012. And now he's looking to build on a rapprochement with China. Under these circumstances, how do you look at Shinzo Abe's visit?
I think Prime Minister Abe is following a double hedging strategy. One, hedging the United States in terms of the economic aspects. Because Japan, if it wants to maintain economic growth rates, it has to expand its economic footprint, including joining the Belt and Road Initiative or investing more in China, which is what the visit currently is about, and also expanding into Southeast Asia in economic projects. For example, the agreement between China and Japan on the Thailand Eastern Coast Development Project to the tune of nearly about $27 billion. And also the currency swap agreement suggests to this hedging the United States in terms of the free trade proposal. Second, hedging the Chinese in the military sphere. Just a few days back, the Japanese self-defense maritime forces have sent submarines to the South China Sea.
Yes.
So they're also hedging the Chinese in the military sphere,
yes,
and strengthening the alliances with the United States. So it's a double hedging strategy.
But you're saying that it's a double hedging strategy, but at the same time, can those really issues be brushed under the carpet? Because Japan has always been wary of China's assertiveness in the South China Sea, and of course, Japanese firms are also talking about they are alleging that there have been violations of intellectual property rights as well, and technology theft as well. So can those issues be really brushed under the carpet?
It's really a complicated issue for the Japanese, how they manage both the China rise,
yes,
and at the same time propose a kind of rule of law,
yes,
in the high seas after the Permanent Court of Arbitration ruling in July 2016 in South China Sea. Also, the Japanese face a lot of flack from the Chinese from the Senkaku Islands
yes,
transgressions.
Yes.
So it's it's a very complicated process.
Absolutely.
They're actually walking on a razor's edge by accommodating Chinese and accommodating the quadrilateral security dialogue with India, US, Australia. So it's a fine balancing act.
Of course, what goes in favor of both China and Japan is, of course, their trade ties, because China is Japan's biggest trading partner. Japan is China's second largest trading partner after the United States and fourth biggest investor. So considering that, of course, the trade relations go a long way.
Indeed. Japan has something like 83,000 companies working in China as compared to 1,300 companies in India. And they have invested more than $300 billion in the Chinese market. However, a recent survey of nearly 3,000 business people in Japan suggested 80% of them have concerns on the political backlash in China on the Japanese business firms. So they're also hedging here by diverting some of the manufacturing sector to Vietnam and other Southeast Asian countries. So it's a very complex kind of approach they are following.
And what about Belt and Road Initiative? Because China was hoping that Shinzo Abe would make a very supportive statement on the Belt and Road Initiative, but how that did not happen, because of course Japan has concern on this project, saddling the poor nations with debt.
Indeed. Many democratic countries today actually are having doubts about the Belt and Road Initiative, especially in terms of the debts, especially in terms of the environmental related issues, also financing of these projects. So there are some concerns, apart from sovereignty claims for countries like India in the China-Pakistan economic corridor. So there is a lot of pressure mounting on the Belt and Road Initiative because of the unilateral positions that China had taken on the Belt and Road Initiative project. So to that extent, the Japanese also have concerns on the BRI. Yet at the same time, they see an economic opportunity, especially in terms of the infrastructure projects, especially in Southeast Asia, like Thailand. They have had a competitive relationship before, as the Indonesian high-speed railway project had indicated. This was backed by a Chinese company, displacing the Japanese. So now they are trying to patch up and try to form a joint kind of effort towards the infrastructure. And since Asia requires something like $26 trillion for infrastructure projects, so this is a model that they are evolving. We have to see how Japan participates in the BRI.
And so finally, one important question. What does this close cooperation between China and Japan mean for India? Of course, India has been wary of China's assertiveness and its growing power, and also the fact that India is part of the Quad that Japan is also a member of.
Indeed, the economic aspect the Japanese are trying to strengthen with China will have some consequences for India as well.
Yes.
Because while as we will see, Prime Minister Modi will be visiting tomorrow on Sunday to Tokyo, and we have various projects on infrastructure which are not immediately happening. On the other hand, the China-Japan economic cooperation is still, despite a lot of political opposition for the Japanese, there are swift developments on the economic front. So India needs to cater for more of these economic projects with Japan. And if these are attractive for the Japanese investors, possibly we will probably have more Japanese investments in India.
All right. So indeed, China and Japan are looking to reset their strained relations with the Shinzo Abe's latest visit to Beijing. Thank you so much, Professor, for joining us and sharing your perspective on that entire story. Thank you so much. Staying with Asia, facing shrinking currency reserves and a crippling fiscal deficit, Pakistan is scrambling to head off a full-blown economic crisis. Imran Khan government has vowed to slash spending and has been seeking lifelines from potential lenders. Saudi Arabia this week pledged $6 billion to the country. Islamabad has already formally requested IMF for a bailout to give the economy breathing room. However, IMF is likely to impose tougher conditions compared to 2013, when Islamabad was given repeated waivers and avoided harsh reforms after receiving a $6.7 billion loan. Pakistan facing a huge economic crisis. marked by a mounting balance of payments deficit and dwindling foreign currency reserves. Ally Saudi Arabia has offered support, giving it $3 billion for a period of 1 year and an additional $3 billion for oil imports. The additional deferred payment facility for oil imports will be in place for 3 years, which will be reviewed thereafter. The agreement came during a visit by Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan to Riyadh, where he met King Salman bin Abdulaziz and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Pakistani markets saw a surge after the announcement.
We expect that the market will further gain. The market will further boom when the Saudi package is actually inducted in the system in Pakistan. I feel that the dollar will further decrease.
While in Saudi Arabia, Imran Khan also attended a high-profile Future Investment Initiative conference. Pakistan's government, led by cricketer turned politician Imran Khan, inherited a mountain of economic challenges when it came to power in July. Imran Khan says his country is desperate to shore up its foreign currency reserves, which are at a 4-year low of $8.4 million. Pakistan is currently facing a balance of payments crisis with a nearly $18 billion deficit, according to the latest figures by the State Bank of Pakistan. While its public sector debt stands at $75.3 billion, which is 27% of Pakistan's GDP.
The immediate concern for our government is to increase our exports. We need to increase our exports because we have shortage of foreign reserves because of our current account deficit. We need to get more remittances through the banking channels because there are about 8 to 9 million Pakistanis who work abroad, who are living abroad. So we need to bolster our foreign exchange reserves.
The Saudi-Pakistan agreement comes weeks after Pakistan formally approached the IMF on 12th of October for a bailout to tide over the economic crisis. But there was some tough talking by IMF Managing Director Christine Lagarde and the US on a bailout plan. IMF has demanded absolute transparency on the country's debts, including those owned by China under the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor projects. That has upset Pakistan. Its finance minister says that Pakistan will have to see that the IMF does not place any undoable conditions for Pakistan in return. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has said that there would be no rationale for an IMF bailout of Pakistan that pays off Chinese loans. Imran Khan is also scheduled to travel to Malaysia next week and to China on 3rd of November to seek financial assistance from these two friendly countries.
लिहाजा आज हमें कर्जा चाहिए ताकि हम ये
We need loans to pay the installments of our loans so we can buy things from abroad. The whole issue concerns $10 to $12 billion. Our short-term goal is a loan of $10 to $12 billion. We can achieve this in two ways. One, we can go to our allies and ask them for help by giving us a loan. The other is going to the IMF. We have debated this and have decided to go to both our allies and the IMF for help.
मुल्क उनके पास जा सकते हैं और उनको कह सकते हैं कि हमें ये जो ब्रिज कर दें.
An IMF team is due to visit Pakistan to kickstart the negotiations on 7th of November. If an assistance package is agreed on, it would be Pakistan's second IMF bailout in 5 years and its 13th since the late 1980s. However, the IMF this time is expected to push Islamabad much harder to enact structural reforms needed to rebalance the economy and rein in spending that has boosted growth but blown out the government budget. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. The Trump administration has announced that it plans to withdraw from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces or the INF Treaty of 1987. The landmark arms control treaty banned the United States and Russia from possessing any ground-launched ballistic and cruise missiles with ranges between 500 and 5,500 kilometers. These weapons have been considered destabilizing to the European continent because of their capability to launch a nuclear strike without early warning. The treaty played a major role in enabling and locking in the diminution of tensions that ended the Cold War. European leaders have opposed US withdrawal, and EU has warned Donald Trump of nuclear arms race risk.
US to withdraw from another treaty. President Donald Trump revealing the US government's intention to withdraw from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty of 1987, which during the Cold War era banned the United States and Russia from possessing any ground-launched ballistic and cruise missiles with ranges between 500 and 5,500 kilometers.
Russia has violated the agreement. They've been violating it for many years, and I don't know why President Obama didn't negotiate or pull out. And we're not going to let them violate a nuclear agreement and go out and do weapons, and we're not allowed to. We're the ones that have stayed in the agreement, and we've honored the agreement, but Russia has not, unfortunately, honored the agreement. So we're going to terminate the agreement. We're going to pull out.
The Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty was negotiated by then US President Ronald Reagan and Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev in 1987. Under the treaty, Washington destroyed 846 missiles and Moscow destroyed 1,846 missiles. However, Washington says Moscow is developing and has developed a ground-launched system in breach of the INF treaty that could allow Moscow to launch a nuclear strike on Europe at short notice. Russia has consistently denied any such violation and has demanded proof from the United States to back up the claims. It further warned that a unilateral US withdrawal from the treaty would be a very dangerous step.
We will wait for an official explanation from our US colleagues. In case US National Security Advisor John Bolton is ready to give them, we will of course listen to him and assess the situation after that.
However, US is not ready to change its mind over the withdrawal. John Bolton, Trump's national security advisor, was in Moscow this week, where he informed Russian leaders of the United States' intention to leave INF. Under the terms of the agreement, the US must give Russia a 6-month notice before formal withdrawal. The US officials also cite China's arms buildup in the Pacific as another central reason for scuttling the pact.
What the activity of other countries like China, Iran, North Korea, and others who are not covered by the treaty, who are free to do whatever they want in the intermediate range and have made very substantial strides to have that capability. We estimate, for example, in the case of China, that somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of all of their ballistic missile capability would violate the INF if they were a party to it.
Following the US's announcement, EU called for dialogue between the US and Russia. Some European countries, including Germany and France, and Asian giant China, also expressed concern.
推进核裁军进程乃至维护全球的战略平衡与稳定发挥了重要的作用，在今天仍然具有十分重要的意义。单方面退约将造成多方面的消极的影响。需要强调的是，就退出条约问题拿中方说事儿，完全是错误的。我们希望有关方面呢能够珍视多年来之不易的成果。
So what are the implications of US's withdrawal? Militarily, US could deploy INF prohibited systems to Europe or Asia in the near term. However, US military has not developed any land-based missiles within the prohibited ranges for decades. However, Moscow could rapidly expand deployment. Trump's move is also likely to undermine the 2010 New START treaty governing US and Russian long-range nuclear systems. The US withdrawal from the treaty would have diplomatic implications, as well with the move further splitting the NATO alliance at a difficult time for transatlantic relations. Besides, it would see a new generation of lethal weapons developed and deployed in Europe. What the world needs now is more, not less, arms control. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And now an update on Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi case. In his first public comments since the journalist's death fueled international condemnation, Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince has said that the killing of Jamal Khashoggi was a heinous crime that cannot be justified. Not only this, the Saudis have also admitted that Khashoggi's murder was premeditated. Meanwhile, the ongoing controversy around the journalist's death has strained Saudi Arabia's relations with the US and other allies.
The Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has vowed to punish all the culprits responsible for the murder of writer Jamal Khashoggi in Turkey. Speaking at a business forum in Riyadh, he said the crime was painful to all Saudis, but he would never allow any rift with Turkey. This is his first public comment since the journalist's murder sparked global condemnation. The Saudis have initially denied all knowledge of the writer's whereabouts, but later admitted that the killing of Saudi journalists in their consulate in Istanbul was premeditated, reversing course yet again on the Saudi account of what happened. Last week, Saudi Arabia sacked 2 key advisors to the prince and arrested 18 people.
The crime was really painful to all Saudis. It is a heinous crime that cannot be justified. Saudi Arabia is carrying out all legal things to finalize the investigation, to cooperate with the Turkish government and to present the perpetrators to the court and take their judgment.
Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan had said Turkey had strong evidence that the journalist was killed in a premeditated and savage murder and has called for the suspects to be tried in Istanbul. Turkey's media had reported that 38 members of staff at the Istanbul consulate were questioned as witnesses. On Tuesday, the US President Donald Trump voiced his strongest criticism of the Saudi government to date and said the killing and subsequent cover-up were a total fiasco. But US has downplayed the news that it will cancel weapon sales to Saudi Arabia in response to the controversy surrounding the death of Khashoggi.
But I would say it was a total fiasco. From day one, from the thought, whoever put it in their minds, that was not a good thought. The process was no good, the execution was no good, and the cover-up, if you want to call it that, was certainly no good.
Meanwhile, the key issue is the body, of which there is still no sign. Khashoggi died during a 2nd October visit to the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. A Saudi official had reportedly said that Khashoggi had died in a chokehold after resisting attempts to return him to Saudi Arabia. His body was then rolled in a rug and given to a local cooperator to dispose of. The death of Khashoggi, a US resident and Washington Post columnist, has sparked global outrage and threatened relations between Riyadh and Washington, as well as other Western nations. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And finally, in an incredible discovery, world's oldest intact shipwreck has been found in the Black Sea. A group of archaeologists and scientists found a ship on the sea floor. Radiocarbon dating shows that the wooden vessel, which has been described as a Greek trading vessel, dates to 400 BC. The group recorded images of the shipwreck using remote deep water cameras, and experts say that the discovery will change our understanding of shipbuilding and seafaring in the ancient world. So take a look at this amazing discovery. I'll see you next week in another informative edition of World Panorama. See you then. Bye-bye.